I'm Alex. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO here at Snorkel, and I'm super excited to be talking about, our perspective on expert data and how it's used for the evaluation and development of specialized AI, especially as we head into this new era of agentic AI, sometimes meaning automation versus co-piloting, sometimes meaning what I think of the traditional sense of multi-step, so steps of reasoning, steps of action, steps of tool use, potentially some memory. But in both of those and all of those aspects, we're going to talk about how that pushes the requirements for data in and specialization in AI. So we have a really exciting, I'm a little biased, but I think a very exciting 90-minute session set up for you. I'm going to give a little bit of a kickoff, talking about some of our perspectives as well as some of the new stuff that we've been working on that you'll hear about more today. We're going to have more detail on that. And we're also going to have a great set of panelists. And you can see here, we have folks from Accenture, BNY, Comcast, QBE, who are going to be participating from the industry side. We'll have a research panel as well, and some demos and deep dives. So with that, I'll jump in. First, I'll start by just reiterating what we had announced a couple weeks back and are quite excited about, which is two new major additions to our AI data development platform. And we're going to talk about and get a closer look at both of them today. The first one is our expert data as a service offering, where we're using our underlying technology platform along with a network of subject matter experts to build and iteratively develop frontier AI data sets in especially highly specialized, high quality domains for evaluation and tuning of AI models and agentic systems. And then we're also announcing, or we recently announced, our evaluation platform specifically focused on settings where it's really critical to have trustworthy, specialized evaluation that's customized to your setting, fine-grained, and potentially over complex agentic scenarios. I want to step back first and just frame a little bit about the moment and what we're excited about here, and of course what informs some of the stuff that you'll hear about today. If you look at this map here, I think there are two key axes to consider throughout AI, and especially in this moment. One is, how accurate do you need your use case to be? Another phrasing of that is how costly are errors? The other axis that I think is critical when thinking about, what AI tool is right for the job and what's needed for your AI solution is, what are the unique kind of domain organizational requirements? Is this a very generic setting that looks a lot like kind of generic internet data, or do you have unique, requirements, data sets, tools, settings, constraints, et cetera? And one very simple way that we think of the world is this distinction between kind of off-the-shelf AI, which is really, not doing justice to how much configuration still needs to happen in the enterprise, of course, but is, something where you can use an existing AI model and an existing LLM, say, with a little bit of prompting or even zero shot to solve the problem, versus where you really not just get additional value, but need specialized AI, something that has been tuned or developed in some more laborious way to be custom to your setting. And in general, as the accuracy requirements go up, as the specialization requirements go up, you need more specialized AI. We see agentic as a general vector that's pushing us in that direction, because agentic, as we talked about, it means often that there are greater costs involved with failure because you're actually automating something versus just acting as an advisory co-pilot. There are more unique tools and actions and organizational requirements to think about when you're, again, taking multiple complex actions in an agentic setting. So generally, our view on the agentic era that we're all hurtling into is that it raises the stakes and increases the need for specialized AI. And as you'll hear us talk about today as a theme throughout, data is the key, or at minimum, one of the most important ingredients in getting to specialized AI, both for evaluation and tuning. So again, that key point of view that you'll hear echoed throughout the talks today about the centrality of data for evaluation and tuning, especially in this agentic setting where it's even more critical and more challenging to evaluate and tune. And number two, that this only works if the data labeling, that we'll talk about throughout is specialized, and it's the right data for your setting. So just to give a brief overview of what we're going to talk about in more depth today on our side, the first is our Expert Data as a Service initiative, which is focused on getting that specialized expert data that is the right data for your setting over to you with the right experts from our network, the right quality controls and checks, the right proportions and mixture of data for your evaluation and tuning needs. This is something that we're really excited to publicly announce. We've been working with a number of the major LLM labs and many other LLM developers on big frontier evaluation and tuning projects already, and now we're public with the offering. A lot of our work is really focused on expert data. Expert could mean academic or STEM, math professors writing challenging prompts and responses, could mean vertical and industry specific, could mean consumer relationship advice, gardening, anime, fiction writing, etc. We're really focused on quality, on diversity, and really forming the right mixtures of data, because today, as much of our research is focused on the academic side, the right mixture of data often beats volume or traditional notions of quality even in getting the right outcomes. And often we're building on really complex frontier tasks where the challenge is to actually stump the models while still being realistic versus just covering the ground they've already saturated. We do a lot of work covering all kinds of areas: reasoning, expert knowledge, agentic and tool use, different modalities, coding, text, multimodal, et cetera, and many different output formats. And we're starting to release samples, by the way. So quick plug for our new leaderboard. We released an agentic finance and insurance benchmark, and the data sets are coming shortly, along with a mathematical reasoning one. There are going to be lots more of these that are coming every week or two. So please check that out if you want to make this all concrete of what kinds of data sets we build via our Expert Data as a Service offering. I'll briefly touch on Evaluate. You're going to hear a lot more about this in a bit of a demo. And again, the purpose of that is not just to kind of pitch our product, which we're excited about, but really just to share our perspective of what's needed for truly specialized production grade evaluation in the agentic world. You'll hear us talk about kind of three major steps or three major ingredients. And I'll briefly go over them before I rush to hand this off to the rest of the show. Number one is the data sets that you feed in. These are often called the benchmark data sets. I'll use the analogy of a standardized test. These would be the questions and the answer keys. Then you need to put effort into building the evaluators. These might be LM as a judge. They might be heuristic. We use a more general term for the models that are actually checking whether your new LLM or agent, how it's scored on the test questions. This is the equivalent of, trained exam graders. And finally, we think about structuring and slicing up the data set into the fine-grained error modes or subsets that are critical. And this is akin to actually breaking down the student's test performance and identifying where are the specific error modes or critical areas where improvement is needed. And this is critical. A benchmark that just spits out a single score is pretty much useless for development, is our perspective. So breaking down a benchmark into actionable subsets so you can go and develop it, whether you're prompting or tuning with more data, is key. So these three ingredients, we're going to talk about them. We're going to show them in a demo. And I'll note that I think they are still very under-supported in the market today. We hear a lot about, evaluation, observability platforms, et cetera. It's kind of like saying, hey, we're standing up a testing center. We've got the chairs, the red pens, the paper. We've got a portal for monitoring your students' grades, but no one's written the test questions. No one's trained anyone to actually grade the exams, and no one's given any thought to the lesson plan of fine-grained feedback of how to improve. Those are the most critical aspects in our view. Those are the hardest ones, and those are the ones that are most anchored around the right specialized data and data labeling. So you'll hear more about how we tackle those head on in our platform and with our techniques in a bit. And you'll hear about how these all blend together, because fundamentally our view is that AI leaders are mixing, good approaches for evaluation, good approaches for development, and faster ways to accelerate their data for both evaluation and tuning through services like our Expert Data as a Service. And that together, these are mixed to create the path forward for specialized AI. So you'll hear more about use cases, large gains with a voice agent at a large SaaS company, major improvements in performance on specialized areas like billing queries for a top 5 global telco, major gains over even state-of-the-art models on customized settings in a CSR setting for a global credit reporting company. We'll share more details on how these three elements of our evaluation platform, development toolkit, and data as a service come together to yield real-world outcomes in specialized settings. And if you're curious about any of that, we'd love to talk. We're friendly people. We're eager to share more and get in depth on your actual use case. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Vincent, who leads our data as a service initiative, to talk more about that.
Awesome. Hey, thank you, Alex, for the great introduction, and super excited to share a little bit more about our expert DaaS or expert data as a service offering that we've been spinning up here at Snorkel. So, hi everyone again. My name is Vincent. I lead our expert DaaS offering, and we're super excited to pull back the curtain a bit today on how we're pairing a decade plus of research of really focused on scaling expertise with a world-class network of experts to drive frontier AI progress. So I'll focus on that today, and then you'll hear from a number of members of our team who will go into a little bit more detail about how this is actually impacting real-world use cases a little bit later in the session. So as Alex alluded to, this next wave of AI systems and agents are no longer relying on data that's readily scraped or crowd labeled or blindly generated with synthetic approaches. And the key here that we found as really driving real world value is the need for specialized data sets that reflect the real world complexity of these AI models today. So these systems and the data sets that power them need to be expert driven. They need to actually have a human in the loop that understands the tasks, that understands how to evaluate them. They need to be high quality, actually curating for the samples that matter is way more high leverage than, getting a bunch of AI slop into your data sets. They need to be diverse in the sense that they need to actually represent the real world distributions of these tasks in the wild. And they need to be complex. They need to actually represent the complexity and capabilities, the multi-step tool, etc., processes of these real-world AI tasks in order to be realistic proxies for these tasks in the wild. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we at Snorkel have leveraged a decade plus of our research and experience in the field, actually scaling expertise with our tech platform. A lot of how we view this problem with our, technology and research lens is to say we want to pair real world experts with a real platform that accelerates their ability to build these data sets, evaluate these models, and in general, much more efficiently with high quality, build these frontier data sets. So in a nutshell, we're really driving these frontier capabilities based on our unique research to production pipelines. We're really proud to have actually powered the current wave of frontier knowledge, reasoning, and agentic AI systems. And a lot of this is often at the intersection of our research and real world practical approach that we pride ourselves in. Two, I'll talk a little bit about how we think about data set level diversity, which is something we view as critical to actually representing real world distributions. We're leveraging structured ontologies, templated task generation, and actual error analysis to make sure we're building towards data sets that reflect real world global distributions that matter. Three, we'll talk a little bit about how our expert network is purpose built to power these specialized data sets. We cover 1,000+ domains spanning from STEM, like physics, chemistry, to professional workloads like finance, accounting, medicine, to consumer interest domains like outdoor activities or relationship advice. And we view all of these different types of expertise as critical to powering this new frontier of AI models. Four, we're going to talk a little bit about quality and how we incorporate our platform and a number of advanced multi-reviewer workflows to make sure that the data sets we're building are actually really of the highest quality and able to deliver superior outcomes. And lastly, we'll talk briefly on how we think about making sure we're really partnering closely with our customers and partners, with our research team, so that we can actually meet the needs of these real world tasks and really custom build data pipelines that matter in practice. So jumping right in, our unique approach is all about, making sure we're at the frontier of these modern, LLM agentic capabilities. We're very proud to have already worked on and powered a number of capabilities across reasoning, expert knowledge, agentic tool use, and also real-world product and user interactions. So a lot of the kind of pieces you'll see from the rest of the team today are going to be about how we take, mix and match a number of these parts of our workflow to really make sure we're able to very flexibly meet the needs of our customers and partners at the frontier. In these frontier settings, we're finding that not only is task level, a guidance really important, but fine-grained distributional control at the dataset level is equally important to making sure you're representing real-world tasks and problems. The key idea here is that experts who are actually building these datasets are already implicitly following base templates for any data points they're generating. And rather than leaving this to chance, we have systems and protocols within our platform to explicitly encode these as templates or constraints in our systems and generate data to propagate and make sure we're generating data to map to the target distributions as desired. At the end of the day, we pair our platform with a really high caliber, trusted network of experts. So this is just a taste of the sets of domains that we cover, but our network comprises of world-class experts that span academic disciplines. This is, truly world-class MD, PhDs, or theoretical physicists who are driving frontier research in their fields. These are actually also professional areas like finance, folks in telecom, insurance, actual areas where, day-to-day jobs require some level of expertise to define tasks and make sure we're building agents that meet the needs. We're also kind of making sure that we cover consumer topics like tourism, retail, personal wellness, to ensure that any sort of product or user-driven actions are supported by the data sets that we build. And our core thesis here is that pairing this network of world-class experts with our technology platform, where we're making them more efficient, making them more productive, is the key to driving these frontier data sets. In order to think about quality, we take a really deliberate and targeted approach. And this is where we leverage multi-expert quality protocols, which are inspired by academic peer review. In a lot of these frontier settings, we find that the notion of ground truth is actually non-trivial to come to. And so having independent reviewers perform reviews, rebuttal protocols, and adjudication protocols to make sure we're resolving any conflicts ends up being really, really critical to ensuring that we have the highest quality in each stage of our data development process. And to add to that, a lot of our technology approach and platform is about accelerating all of these points of feedback for our experts. So we want to make sure our experts are very closely aligned to the quality guidelines, that any sort of feedback they're giving about edge cases or additional error modes, we're incorporating really quickly. And this feedback loop ends up being what makes it easy for us to actually iterate really, really quickly and get to the frontier of quality for these use cases on relatively short order. In addition to kind of task level quality, we think a lot about expert level quality as well. And we're actively providing, feedback to our experts, dynamically triaging which data points make sense to go to which experts in certain domains. And this type of process allows us to really fine-grained, provide really fine-grained feedback to make sure that we're allocating the right tasks to the right experts and we're, optimizing the quality of these data sets in the long term. In the background, a lot of the workflow that you're hearing about is driven by the core technology platform that we've built up based on the research and kind of real-world workflows that we've learned from over a decade plus. In a nutshell, this is an iterative development cycle where we're taking expert corrections and feedback, using them to drive and understand error modes, and then reincorporating them into custom fine-tuned and distilled evaluators to make sure that our process for generating and quality controlling data is ever dynamic and relevant for the task at hand. So ultimately, I just ran through a very quick whirlwind tour of how we think about the actual background workflows and protocols for generating high quality data. We've been super humbled and excited to actually power the frontier with specialized high quality data. And I will now toss it back over to the team where you'll hear a little bit more about how we've leveraged this in process to push some real world data sets.
Thank you, Vincent. Some fantastic insights there on what it really takes to curate high quality data sets. Hi, everyone. I am Vignesh. I'm an AI solutions engineer here at Snorkel AI. Today, I'm excited to walk you through how Snorkel enables enterprises to build powerful, specialized AI from start to finish. What you're about to see is the culmination of thousands of hours of work by our incredible product, engineering, research, and field teams. This demo isn't just a showcase of a technical showcase, it's a reflection of our deep understanding of real-world challenges in Gen AI and how we have transformed those insights into a cohesive end-to-end offering. Snorkel's expert data as a service, the Snorkel Evaluate platform, and our AI as a service offering together deliver the most comprehensive offering in this space. Let's dive in.
Today's demo is focused on fueling smarter agents by curating high-quality benchmark datasets for agentic settings, evaluating language models on the curated benchmark, iterating and fine-tuning these systems to then achieve high accuracy. We'll explore how an AI assistant, designed as an insurance underwriting co-pilot with multi-turn dialogue capabilities and access to multiple tools, can be rigorously assessed and fine-tuned. The goal? Achieving reliable, domain-specific performance using a blend of advanced expert data development and SME-aligned evaluation frameworks. Agentic systems can look like this: chains of model inference nodes wired together into complex multi-agent pipelines. With today's tooling, creating these systems has become deceptively easy. But with that comes noise. Imperative versus declarative, graphs versus loops, abstraction versus control. These are all engineering debates about tools, not systems. And while useful, they miss the bigger picture. In the end, what builders are really trying to do is ship usable, production-ready systems. The real question becomes, can we trust this agent? Can we depend on its output to assist real-world users? Agentic systems can also look like this: a clean abstraction called an environment, where complexity is tucked behind a single interface. This environment handles access to tools, enforces domain rules and policies, and applies contextual constraints. At the core is a fine-tuned model, a purpose-trained language model that acts as the intelligent decision layer. It's tailored to the specific domain, reduces system fragility, minimizes surface area for security vulnerabilities, and limits cascading failures across chained LLM calls. This is where abstraction meets control with clarity and safety. Regardless of how your architecture approaches, the central challenge remains: how do we reduce system complexity and replace it with robustness? Our answer is threefold. Number one, data. We need rich, diverse datasets for training and evaluation. Datasets that reflect the real-world edge cases, deployment dynamics, and task variability these systems will face. Number two, evaluation. We need a scalable, principled evaluation framework, something frictionless for teams working on AI projects, yet powerful enough to support automated, trustworthy feedback at unprecedented scale. Number three, expertise. We need domain-aligned optimization strategies like reinforcement learning pipelines guided by subject matter experts to push these systems toward continual learning and production-grade reliability. So in short, data, evaluation, and expertise. And Snorkel AI, we've built capabilities across all three pillars, with Snorkel Expert Data as a Service, Snorkel Evaluate, and AI as a Service to support every stage of your Gen AI development journey. To make all of this more tangible, let's consider a real-world scenario. We're building an AI assistant for property and casualty insurance, specifically focused on commercial underwriting for small businesses. This assistant must be capable of nuanced multi-turn dialogue and equipped to operate within complex regulatory and business constraints. Step one is defining the system's architecture. For this use case, we built an agentic framework leveraging two powerful frameworks, LangGraph and Model Context Protocol. This architecture allows language models to assume different roles and access external resources such as, in this case, an appetite matrix, a SQL database, and free text underwriting guidelines. One language model simulates the underwriter, guided by a well-scoped task description. This design provides modularity and control. Step two is designing what the assistant should do and how using structured examples. We developed a high-quality structured dataset consisting of prompts, gold standard traces, and target responses. Every single data point was co-created with a chartered property casualty underwriter to ensure expert alignment. We also performed in-depth data quality assessments, measuring diversity using task type distributional spread, measuring difficulty via the performance of top-tier language models. The result? a dataset that accurately reflects the real-world complexity of insurance underwriting. The tasks in our dataset often involve implicit constraints embedded in underwriter instructions and explicit constraints that require inference from contextual clues. These constraints are critical for measuring whether AI system is able to be precise in its reasoning and is contextually grounded in its responses. The domain setting also involves the use of distractor tools that the language model is required to ignore in its workflow. This slide also highlights our ability to work with multiple data modalities and output formats tailored to a variety of use cases beyond underwriting. Snorkel's expert data as a service brings a differentiated approach to high-stakes AI development. We have built a multi-reviewer adjudication workflow, enabling collaborative feedback from multiple expert curators. This is overlaid with rigorous quality control techniques, ensuring that every example is not just high quality, but also anticipates the diversity of real production scenarios. The prompts are first curated while accounting for task diversity across 6 task types. The golden responses are generated to aid verifiability, all with our expert network of underwriters. Different language models are tested on the curated prompts, and the resulting traces from different generations go through further evaluation with the underwriters. The feedback is then incorporated, and then the iterative cycle gets repeated. So as you can imagine, this wasn't a one-shot effort. We engage in a deeply iterative development cycle informed by feedback from panel discussions with sometimes up to 10 expert underwriters at a time. These sessions helped us surface failure patterns and refine both the dataset and system behavior with each iteration. This loop of expert correction, insight, system refinement is really what enabled us to produce a truly robust and trustworthy agentic traces dataset. This dataset has been made open source on Hugging Face, and you can go and take a look at it there. Now let's shift focus to evaluation, a critical step in bringing agentic systems to production. Using the Snorkel Evaluate platform, we conduct a rigorous assessment of the conversational traces generated by various language models on our benchmark dataset. We analyze how performance varies across task types, surface failure modes, and extract key insights that help us fine-tune and improve system behavior. This isn't just about the performance numbers, it's about understanding cognition in context. Even some of the best frontier models, as you can see here, those leading benchmarks struggle here. On our insurance-specific benchmark, top-tier models achieve much less than 80% accuracy. This actually underscores 2 things. The first is the frontier complexity of our benchmark dataset, co-developed with our expert contributors. And second, the critical need for robust evaluation and fine-tuning to bridge the gap between high-performing prototypes and dependable production systems. We found that none of the frontier models consistently reasoned efficiently over tools, but it is possible by using the metadata provided. All frontier models missed at least one critical piece of logic this way, nearly 99% of the time. This is where task-specific evaluation becomes indispensable for both diagnosing errors and designing better optimization strategies. This is exactly what Snorkel Evaluate is built for. As an evaluation-first platform, Snorkel Evaluate tackles one of the most critical and often overlooked challenges in deploying agentic systems, which is closing the gap between an exciting MVP and a production-ready solution. With built-in support for creating specialized evaluators, fine-grained slicing, Snorkel Evaluate empowers teams to move beyond POCs towards deeply reliable, explainable AI systems that enterprises can trust. With that said, let's get into the demo. This is the Snorkel Evaluate platform. It is an enterprise-grade platform that is used by some of the largest Fortune 500 companies in the world. It has dedicated workspaces for different users, role-based access controls, and it supports data isolation, privacy, and security. It's also a single centralized platform for subject matter experts and data scientists to collaborate. The data can be uploaded from a whole range of sources. In this case, I will call the dataset Insurance Benchmark Dataset. I'll choose to upload the dataset from my local folder. I'll select the split as train, and I'll hit Verify Data Sources. The dataset can also come from a whole range of different sources. It could come from your cloud storage. It could be RDBMS, it could be Databricks, it could be Snowflake, etc. Once the dataset is verified,
I'll specify what the dataset actually is. In this specific case, the insurance dataset is a conversational trace, so I will choose that. You will also notice that we natively support other formats, including PDFs, and do a lot of pre-processing from within the platform. Once done, I will add the data source. I've already brought the dataset into the platform. This page shows the uploaded dataset. And the first thing you'll notice is that a single dataset can be attached to multiple different things. It can be attached to a number of different label schema, a number of different annotation batches for manual labeling, a number of different applications which are NLP-based model development workflows, a number of different prompts for classification, extraction, summarization type of use cases. In this specific case, we are most interested in benchmarks. Benchmarks are how we evaluate these agentic conversational traces. So let's go and take a look at benchmarks, how to create them, and how to tune them. A benchmark is a collection of an evaluation dataset with each data point allocated to a specific set of slices or subcategories, a number of different criteria, and a number of different evaluators. Let me go and attach that particular benchmark to this. Let's give it a name. Let's call this Copilot Baseline. And let's add a short description for what this actually is. The dataset viewer, which you can see here, provides a structured view of what the conversational traces look like. And as you can see, this is a tree structure with the user message and the agent responses interleaved with a number of different tool calls chained together by the language model itself. An agentic system like this can go wrong in any one of those steps, and it's very hard to find out exactly where it has gone wrong without proper evaluation. That is precisely what we want to know. Also worth noting is the fact that the product provides a number of out-of-the-box criteria to evaluate GenAI systems. You could be evaluating RAG system, for instance. In those cases, context recall or context relevance may be of great importance to you. Our research teams of PhD scientists here at Snorkel have assessed a wide range of evaluation metrics most suitable for various GenAI use cases and have created the evaluators behind each of these criteria. These growing lists of out-of-the-box criteria are available for use to all of our customers. For this demo, I've already created a benchmark, so let's go and take a look at that. The first thing that we need to do as soon as we create a benchmark is create criteria. A criteria is a custom axis along which we want to evaluate our agentic system on. It could be a commonly accepted measurement criteria like truthfulness, like groundedness, or it could be very specific to your business or domain or one that's most suitable for this use case. We need to provide a criteria name. Let's call it clarification seeking. A criteria description. Does the agent ask clarifying questions where it is required? And finally, we need to select an output schema, which could be a Boolean yes or no, or it could be an ordinal scale where the language model evaluator or the manual evaluator can score the response on a scale of 0 to 4. For today's demo, we'll use LLM as a judge evaluator to facilitate the automated evaluation of this dataset. We'll also use our experts to perform a double-blind evaluation on the same dataset. Once the criteria is created, we can go into the criteria tuning workflow. This is the core workflow of tuning these evaluators. The platform provides access to a broad range of language model providers. It could be OpenAI, it could be Anthropic, or you could have your own model deployed in a custom endpoint on Bedrock. We can connect to any of these sources. The platform also enables LLM as a judge versioning, so all of the work done on fine-tuning these evaluators is saved, they're traceable, and they are auditable. The main input into this LLM as a judge is the prompt. This input is controlled by tuning the system prompt, which contains a high-level input to the language model on the role we would like it to take, the task we would like it to perform, and most importantly, the evaluation prompt. The eval prompt should consist of the task itself, which is specified here. We must provide evaluation guidelines for the LLM as a judge to consider when performing this evaluation, a response schema, the formatting requirements, and finally, parameter values that need to be provided as part of each data point in the dataset. Our first evaluation run is often an out-of-the-box prompt, and we run this on a narrow set of data points in the training data. What this does is that it returns an evaluation mean value, as you can see here, for that specific criteria. What this is telling me is that on the conciseness scale, on the conciseness criteria, where 0 is an overly verbose response and 2 is a concise response, the 4,000 traces in this dataset score an average of 1.01, which is okay. But how do we know that this particular value is actually reliable? How can we trust this value? So what we do is we invite some of our experts in the business to provide ground truth. We create a batch, a manual annotation, manual evaluation batch, select the criteria, say conciseness. We assign it to someone in the business, let's say Adam, and we select the split. When we do this, an annotation batch, an annotation job is actually created, and the SME can log into the platform and look at their own view of an evaluation interface. You will notice that this is an exact replica. The whole conversational trace, the associated metadata, the parameters, they're all the same as what we gave the LLM as a judge. What you'll also notice is that the same evaluation criteria as well as the label schema that we created for LLM as a judge runs are also available here. The expert who logs into the platform provides their expert view on whether or not certain response is correct, whether or not a certain response is concise, etc. Collaborative workflows including leaving comments for the development teams, adding individual data points into specific slices of subcategories maximizes feedback capture and promotes a culture of collaborative troubleshooting. In this case, we have programmatically uploaded the slices to categorize each data point, each trace, and attribute it to a task type and a model type. One of the biggest differentiators of Snorkel Evaluate is our ability to seamlessly bring together the trust benefits of using manual eval with the scale benefits offered by LLM as a judge evaluators. Coming back to the criteria tuning window, I can see side by side how the LLM as a judge evaluator and the business expert have judged a certain data point. In this specific case, their judgments converge, but there may be cases where they diverge. How do we quantify this alignment and measure convergence versus divergence? This metric here, the eval ground truth agreement metric, does precisely that. At 0.69, this tells me that the SME and the LLM as a judge agree with each other on about 2/3 of the cases. My role is to iterate on this evaluator so I can increase alignment between the two. That is precisely what I will do. I'll improve the rubric provided here in the evaluation prompt to capture edge cases that the LLM as a judge may not be aware of. I might provide a few examples so the LLM as a judge knows what is concise and what isn't. And in this process, my sole objective is to increase the overall alignment between the two. This iterative process increases the alignment between the two evaluators. I check the alignment on my validation split to make sure that I'm not over-optimizing or overfitting the evaluation prompt to the training set. This version shows that the alignment is all the way up to 81% on the validation set from 69% we originally saw. I can now say with a lot of confidence that the conciseness metric on the conversational traces sits right in the middle at about 1.06 on a scale of 0 to 2, a metric I'll definitely be looking to improve on the agentic system itself. We go through this iterative process of fine-tuning the different evaluators to increase alignment with the SME experts in the business across all of our main criterion. The evaluation prompt is one way to control the expressiveness of these automated judges. Another way to control their expressiveness is to tune binary classifiers that excel in making judgments across a handful of criteria. Snorkel's capabilities also extend to doing data development and model training to build traditional classifiers using programmatic labeling functions built with heuristics or prompts
and even embeddings. The platform offers enormous flexibility to our enterprise customers, allowing them to build evaluators across a whole host of different techniques. We'll now zoom out and take a high-level view of the performance of different language models on different task types in this particular agentic setting. I can see from the main evaluation dashboard that I now have fully tuned evaluators for my criteria. These evaluators show high alignment with my subject matter experts in the business, specifically on conciseness, on the metric eval ground truth agreement. My evaluator tuning efforts have resulted in significant improvement in alignment, as I can witness through this chart. In addition, I can see performance across all the fine-grained slices I've defined. These slices are both task-based as well as model-based. I can see from the table that GPT 4.1 is more correct compared to Claude 3.7 Sonnet. I can also see that O3 is more concise than GPT 4.1. This structured approach to evaluating agentic systems provides key insights into how these systems operate, where they fail, and how to improve them. No matter the fine-tuning approach, a robust framework to assess GenAI systems is critical to building confidence in them, as well as offer performance guarantees that help them take into production. Eventually, we want to get these systems into the hands of end users, and the only way to get there is using a systematic approach to evaluating them. The insights we get from the broad automated and SME-aligned evaluation framework gives us critical clues on how to fine-tune language models to excel in domain-specific use cases like this one. Reinforcement learning has emerged as a powerful method for helping models self-improve, driven by sparse reward signals. The key? High-quality rewards. We use the same evaluators from Snorkel Evaluate as reward functions in our RL loop, creating a seamless bridge between assessment and optimization. The result? Even small models, when trained with expert-aligned rewards, achieve high accuracy and strong process compliance. What follows are 3 results from this work, led by our research and AI as a service teams. In agentic systems, process compliance, accurate and efficient tool use is the most critical metric. Using LLM as a judge evaluators built on Snorkel Evaluate, we were able to push process compliance to 100% even in a small model. This chart compares out-of-the-box Qwen 2.57b with a reinforcement-tuned version guided by evaluator-based reward signals. Now, this slide is proof that small models can outperform frontier models in domain-specific settings with the right data, evaluation, and reward signals. The Qwen 2.5 model achieves 76% accuracy, 4% more than the best frontier model, using reward signals from the LLM as a judge evaluators only. We also trained a process reward model using evaluation data to generate efficient reward signals. In an experimental setting, this distilled PRM pretty much doubled the performance of the base model. While its top accuracy is slightly lower than the LLM as a judge alone, it does open the door for significant efficiency gains, as you will see in the next slide. The chart on the left shows the PRM runs much faster than LLM as a judge, reducing RL training cost and time. This is actually a key compute multiplier that will allow us to train a model with more data given a certain compute. The chart on the right shows that when combined with LLM as a judge in the reward pipeline, the PRM accelerates convergence on both tool execution and task efficiency. Together, this hybrid reward strategy offers high performance with high efficiency. That wraps up the session. At Snorkel, we built one of the most comprehensive end-to-end offering in this space, with expert data as a service, the Snorkel Evaluate platform, and AI as a service, all working together to help enterprises build, assess, and optimize GenAI systems that are ready for production.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Vignesh, for sharing that. And thank you, everyone, for we've been getting some great questions in the Q&A, some great discussion. And hopefully that was a useful, kind of double click into some of what we were talking about. Again, we'll hear these themes about how, data generation and curation, data labeling in the form of evaluating and slicing data, and in the form of providing signals for reward models that can lead to incredible outcomes with reinforcement learning. All of these things are about, at the core, specialized data development and labeling. And you saw a glimpse there of how, both from the start of the process, creating a rich and representative and challenging benchmark data set, all the way to the evaluation, the labeling or evaluation of the output of LLMs and agentic systems, to kind of slice and partition the data set, and finally, even looking a little bit into the very near future, we think, of where that is directly used to automate through reinforcement learning the adjustment and correction of LLMs and agentic systems based on those evaluations. There you have kind of our double click and data-centric perspective. Now, to go even a little bit more than a double click, although broader than just our products and more about the concepts and research themes behind them, I'm incredibly excited to introduce Fred Sala. Fred is a professor at University of Wisconsin-Madison and also a chief scientist at Snorkel. Welcome, Fred.
Thanks so much, Alex. Really happy to be here. As Alex mentioned, I'm Fred Sala. I'm the chief scientist here at Snorkel AI. We're super excited to have a chance to talk today about how the data landscape is evolving, especially as AI systems are becoming more powerful, more capable, and a lot more sophisticated. We're going to have a research panel with 4 panelists who are at the forefront of these changes. With us today are 4 of our researchers from Snorkel AI. Excellent. So first we have Amanda D'Souza, who's a staff applied research scientist. Welcome, Amanda. We have Armin Parchami, who's a director of research engineering. Welcome, Armin. We have Chris Glaze, who's a principal research scientist. And finally, we have Tom Walsh, who's a staff applied research scientist. Thank you, folks, for joining us. Let's go ahead and dive into the questions. So for the first question, we'll kind of follow up on some of the things that Alex was just mentioning. So this is going to be about the evolution of the need for AI data. We've kind of moved from what used to be simple supervised learning style data sets to what are now things like very complex agentic workflows, as we've mentioned. So Armin, what kind of fundamental shifts are you seeing in what constitutes good training or good evaluation data for today's AI systems?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the data landscape has fundamentally shifted in 3 key ways. First is that we've seen the data moved from static data sets to kind of dynamic multi-turn conversations. So previously we had clean input-output pairs that never changed over time. Now we're dealing with complex dialogues where an agent's decision or user responses can completely alter the entire sample. If you update the model or system prompt, the agent behaves totally differently, and thus the same user prompt requires reannotation of the sample. Building on that first point, the complexity also has grown exponentially. A multi-turn conversation isn't just harder, it's fundamentally different in terms of how you represent the data and how you annotate it. Each turn depends on everything that came before it. And in each turn of the conversation, the agent needs to kind of decide when to use the tools, when to ask for clarification, and how to recover from mistakes. This creates an explosion of possible interaction path that we simply didn't have before. And third, is that we've shifted from caring just about the final answer to caring deeply about the reasoning process. In the old paradigm, if your model correctly classified an email as a spam, you are kind of done. And now we need to understand a lot more. Did the agent use the right tools? Did it reason logically? Did it handle the edge cases gracefully? This means that our data annotation requirements have grown from simple labels to capturing entire reasoning traces over multi-turn conversations with complex tool use patterns. We've essentially gone from here's your data set to here's an interactive environment for both training and evaluation.
A lot of changes. Thanks, Armin. Amanda, how does this compare to the data challenges that you faced when you were working with earlier machine learning paradigms?
Yeah, I think the big shift has been where we've had to spend time developing data. In a lot of the earlier work, a lot of time has been spent upfront curating and engineering these large data sets and thinking about things like class imbalance, correlated features, etc. Whereas with today's agentic or reasoning models, like Armin said, we need to think about not just the final response, but how they got to that response. And so tool calling patterns, reasoning traces become much more important than just final answers for optimizing these models. And with it, of course, comes a lot of challenges in how to best use these data signals. For example, using instrumentation or traceability tools are some of the data challenges that you might encounter.
Awesome. So if I can summarize those great answers, I would say something like the incredible capabilities of the models that we have today. These have also translated into a lot greater data complexity and have brought up a lot of new challenges that we're facing when we're building high quality training and evaluation data. So let's zoom in a little bit there and let's talk about a couple of the scenarios that come up all the time now and do have this kind of complexity. So especially reasoning and also tool use and the kind of data that we have there. So looking ahead, Chris, what types of reasoning capabilities are going to require new forms of training and evaluation data?
Yeah, really good question. And, both Armin and Amanda have already touched on some of this. What we've seen is that reasoning with tools is a very different beast compared to just reasoning over your pure problems as you might in, math or physics or a puzzle. That when you give these frontier models access to tools, they have to reason in kind of an action space. And we see surprising errors there. And as Armin said, process actually matters, not just the final answer. One of the reasons is because we all care about test time compute and arriving at the answer efficiently, saving costs. And just one example, say a model is going to write a SQL query. Well, what columns in the database are you going to access? Well, first you have to look up the metadata, and we can give these models access to the metadata through another tool, and almost every time they ignore it and write a query over some hallucinated column. Then they realize, oh, I have to look up the metadata. So then they do the metadata, write a good SQL query. But I mean, even top-notch models do this, which is a very simple reasoning problem, and they just don't get it at first, which is surprising. They can solve for theoretical physics, but they can't do that. So that just an example of the challenges I see ahead, reasoning over tools. They can use tools, they can reason, but the combination is still a pain point. And then just briefly, Armin mentioned multi-turn. Absolutely. Now you put these models in front of users and you have to interact with users over multiple turns to, forage for information from the user. That makes it combinatorially more difficult. They have to ask the right questions. And we even see models failing on that front occasionally. Some of the models do a really good job, but as soon as you put this interactive component in, just makes everybody's life a little more complicated, especially on the evaluation front.
Thanks, Chris. Lots of fun, new, and perhaps unintuitive behaviors that we really have to be careful about in these new scenarios. Amanda, how do you obtain and curate data to help evaluate whether models are able to use tools effectively?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's so much to say there. I will talk maybe about 3 points. First is to echo what Alex and Winston stressed earlier. Evaluation data must really allow for fine-grained evaluation. And this means just not measuring task completion, but also task efficiencies, hallucination rates, and then using the techniques that we have at our disposal. For example, process reward models are really great for measuring stepwise verification and also control. And the second is that one of the key goals of AI systems has always been generalization. And this stays true of agentic systems as well. And so making sure that we have unseen tasks, unseen tools in our evaluation set can really help measure the generalizability of these models that we're building. And then lastly, in the past, we've thought of evaluation and benchmarks as sort of a artifact that you create earlier in the cycle and then use that as a static artifact. But now really letting evaluation evolve with model development so that we can capture new emergent behavior, I think is really key.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing all of that, Amanda. And clearly, reasoning and tool use and agentic workflows, all these things are demanding a lot of new ideas about how we're going to be able to drive model quality, training side, evaluation side, all of this. So speaking of quality, let's also briefly discuss kind of data quality as a whole in any of these AI applications that we've talked about. So let's start with Chris. Chris, you've seen the consequences of poor data in real deployments. What are the most critical quality issues that you're seeing with current AI training and evaluation data?
Yeah, another really good question. So I've divided into three areas. The first and probably the most basic one that I see a lot of our customers struggle with is even defining quality to begin with. A lot of the pure research that I've seen over the past year, especially, is focused on very kind of cleanly verifiable problems. So again, coming back to like math and physics or coding, either you get the answer right or not. It's pretty binary, and they're complicated problems, don't get me wrong, but whether or not you get the problem right is a little more clear cut than what I see in our real enterprise use cases, where you can get subject matter experts and product development folks who will just disagree on pretty basic aspects of the problem. And so how do you develop data with that kind of uncertainty? Well, the first thing you need to do is resolve those disagreements and spell out careful rubrics, so that experts can sit down, collaborate with each other, and specify with a little more clarity what good looks like to them. So that's something that's hard work, but it pays off in the long run. And it's something that we see repeatedly in real customer data is that lack of clarity right off the bat. Um, the second data quality issue I see is with actually hallucinations and detecting those hallucinations. So frontier models are really good at solving problems, and they've learned a lot. You throw tens of billions of parameters into a model, and it's probably going to memorize a good amount of information and actually reason over it pretty well with the right training regimen. But when you give it new kind of problems that look like the problems they've learned on, they're prone to hallucinate. So for example, Vignesh was talking about this insurance data set that I helped develop with our experts. You see these models make up insurance products that passed the sniff test, but they were nowhere to be found in what the underwriters were giving to them. They just kind of look right. So those are pretty insidious hallucinations that are hard to detect. And if you don't filter those out, you can get a big problem, not just with training, but with even evaluation and detecting low quality samples to begin with. The third one has to do with really, this is about agentic systems specifically, is how you simulate an environment, almost analogous to robotics. So if you want to benchmark a model that is operating in a real IT ecosystem, how do you integrate that ecosystem into your benchmark? That's a tough problem. There are databases and repos of documents that are involved in this agentic system, and so how do you sample that and simulate how that agent would behave when you're benchmarking? And I'm using benchmarking in a very specific way here that, for a specific customer problem. But you could even imagine that for more generic vertical specific problems. In insurance, this is something we've had to solve for with our experts. How do we recreate an insurance-like environment and simulate the dynamics that are challenging for models? That's another hard problem. And if you don't do that well, if you just naively kind of throw generic tables at it, you're probably not getting a good benchmark. So I just said a lot. Just to summarize, I would say expert agreement, getting alignment on quality, hallucination detection, insidious hallucination detection, and then simulating data realistically.
Thanks for walking us through all those obstacles, Chris. And I agree, the term insidious hallucinations should become a standard, right? Those are the real killer.
Indeed.
Tom, let me kick it over to you. So how do you validate that the data that you've gotten is actually going to be useful for models and for systems?
Yeah, and I think Chris mentions a great point here. It's essential to have a very clear understanding of what good looks like. And this applies to data that you're curating for model training, and maybe more importantly, for understanding the quality of model outputs during evaluation. And that could be for process-based evaluation or outcome-based. I think when it comes to Gen AI applications, we need to move beyond the sort of monolithic understanding of data quality, that being a very singular notion of good or bad, and towards a more purposefully defined sense of fine-grained attributes that paint a richer picture of the data. And this is exactly what Vignesh was demoing earlier by building out specific evaluators, or evaluators that focused on specific attributes of the data or desirable attributes. And then, like, building upon that as an example, instead of simply rating chatbot outputs as good or bad, you should try and think of it in terms of what are the desirable and undesirable features of a response. And you could do that by considering tone, style, formatting, relevance to the user query. And domain expertise are great here to help surface those features that are really important. And then once we have thought about these fine-grained, multi-aspect evaluators, we can start taking more informed actions. For example, if you notice during evaluation that your model fails to correctly interpret user intent, you can then go back to the training data and try to understand why that has occurred. Maybe your training data doesn't correctly exhibit user intent detection. And once you connect the two together, you can start to take actions to make targeted improvements. And this is all driven through a sort of very fine-grained understanding of what quality means.
Awesome. Lots of fun challenges there. Thank you, Tom. So let me actually kind of wrap up with a fourth question, which is going to be all about human in the loop, especially for AI data creation. So there's an ongoing debate right now in the community about the role of human expertise when building and evaluating AI systems. So Armin, I wanted to ask you, when you're building an advanced AI system, how do you decide when and where to deploy human expertise, annotations, signal coming from experts, rather than relying on alternatives like distillation, synthetic data, etc.?
Yeah, a good question. The way I say it is that it's really not about choosing between these different types of data inputs, between expert annotation and synthetic data and distillation. It's usually about using human expertise more effectively. We often have the cold start problem in AI where we need a lot of training data, but we don't have enough samples yet. There, I think synthetic data can help us bootstrap. We can get an initial coverage quickly, but that's where human expertise becomes critical. Using experts to verify and refine the high value samples is going to be the key. Capturing those nuanced decisions that Chris mentioned earlier with reasoning traces and complex multi-turn conversations with tool calling. That's going to be an important factor with the human expertise. Human experts basically can validate whether an agent's reasoning actually makes sense. Did it actually ask the right question? Did it pick the right tool? And so on. So additionally, also, we can use this expert review of the data points to learn more about the generation and where generation is weakest. This also helps us kind of focus that human effort where it matters the most. Basically the edge cases, the ambiguous scenarios, and the domain-specific nuances. The gist of it is that synthetic data gives us a scale and human expertise ensures that the quality. So it's about basically amplifying that human expertise.
Yeah, that's a great breakdown. And let me kind of close up by asking Tom what you think more about the future. So what role do you see human expertise playing, as models continue developing and getting more capable?
Yeah, absolutely. To give you a quick answer here and to build off what Armin's just spoken through, I think as models become more capable and they're going to be used in more complex tasks or in more sophisticated, say, multi-agent systems, there's always going to be a growing need for expert oversight. So the outputs of these models, or even the training data itself, may be too complex for a layperson to validate. And instead, it's going to require experts to judge things like correctness, help identify deception, ensure safety, and ensure compliance as well, particularly relevant for enterprise applications. And I think this is particularly true in specialized domains like medicine and law, where actual harm can be caused by misaligned outputs. So I think, as models become more capable and they're applied to new tasks and new domains, we're going to continue to see a very strong need for expert oversight within sort of the model development process.
Thank you, folks. Yeah, it sounds like the value of human expertise isn't going anywhere. All right, so thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. We've heard some super exciting insights. We also wanted to get a chance to plug kind of some of our new research artifacts that are often centered around a lot of the ideas you've been hearing about. So for example, please go check out our new and expanded insurance underwriting data set. It actually captures many of these exact challenges that we've talked about. So agentic kind of challenges, multi-turn tool calling capabilities. You can find the actual data set on Hugging Face, and we've just recently posted a blog about how we've built this on our Snorkel AI blog. So I wanted to use kind of our last few seconds here to thank our panelists. Thanks so much, folks. We really enjoyed getting the chance to share with you some of our ideas around expert data and the way they're being used and will be used in AI systems and a lot of the new challenges that we're facing. We'd also like to hear from you, of course. What are the most important challenges around data and AI that you're facing? Thanks so much, folks. And now I'll return it to the others.
Well, thank you, Fred, and thank you, panelists. Lots of interesting stuff discussed there about the combination of programmatic and synthetic and human components of all stages of data set generation, curation, labeling, and usage, and actually evaluating and tuning AI systems. Since we're a couple minutes behind, rather than going into some of those great points in more detail, I'm just going to have us turn now to the frontier of actually deploying AI in the enterprise for real outcomes, which overlaps, as we all know, very heavily with the world of research, since the folks we're about to hear from are absolutely working on the cutting edge, as anyone who's deploying real AI and agentic AI value is. Anyway, without further ado, we'll turn to Sonia Crosby of QBE, Mike Ross of BNY, and Jan Newman from Comcast, moderated by John Ratson of Accenture. John, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Alex. We've seen the world taken by storm, at least in the media, in terms of AI, Gen AI, and agentic AI over the past few years, especially agentic this past year. However, many organizations have struggled to move Gen AI into scaled implementations, and most importantly, have been challenged to demonstrate ROI from Gen AI investments. So given how powerful AI is and seemingly easy Gen AI is to prompt and get outputs, why are many companies struggling? One of the reasons is that there are certain foundational underpinnings that need to be in place in order to deploy Gen AI at scale and achieve and measure that benefit. Accuracy seems to be a major concern for C-suites in rolling out Gen AI at scale, and the probabilistic nature of AI creates a state that still leaves an uncertainty gap and can manifest itself in terms of hallucinations, errors, and incorrect context. So with that context and backdrop, I'd like to introduce our panel for this session, and let's go around the room here. Sonia, could you start us off?
Thanks so much. Hi, I'm Sonia Crosby. I'm the Chief Data and Analytics Officer for QBE's Australia Pacific region. Our business is a pretty early adopter of Gen AI, mostly in achieving workflow efficiencies, but we also have now some larger programs live to better support our claims and underwriting activities.
Thanks, Sonia. Mike, could you introduce yourself as well?
Absolutely. Thanks, John. Michael Ross. I'm the Platform Product Manager for ELIZA, which is BNY's AI platform. It serves not only to provide AI capabilities to approximately 98%, I believe, of our employee base now, but also serves as the bedrock on which we're able to build agentic and multi-agent solutions and provide that common pane of glass to be able to have the transparency and the trust that is required for scaled adoption.
Thanks. And last but not least, Jan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jan Neumann, and I lead the AI technologies team for Comcast Cable. We help the organization to leverage AI as a COE, focused on research, like looking around what's coming next, help desk and solution design functions, providing educations for making it easy for the company to adopt AI, as well as governance. And then we also try to make tangible impact with AI by building solutions and embedding our experts into the business, and finally figuring out how we can accelerate AI development and adoption using platforms that bridge any capability gaps that exist.
Thanks, Jan. And I'm Dr. John Ratson. I lead our data and AI for the financial services sector for Accenture. How are you each using, just name a couple of use cases where you're using Gen AI in your companies. Jan, let's start with you.
We're focusing on kind of like some of the use cases that probably a lot of companies start with. So specifically customer service, it's a natural application for Gen AI to make it more conversational. Another area is around marketing and sales, to look at how we can use generative AI to accelerate and kind of create better personalized solutions. And then finally, we are looking at generative AI in general to optimize kind of the workflows around our network and security offerings.
Sonia, you mentioned underwriting. Maybe elaborate a bit on what you're doing there with Gen AI.
Yeah, sure. Our underwriters receive enormous amounts of unstructured data, and they need to turn around and distill it and turn it around and associate it with our rules and risks very, very quickly. So we're using Gen AI to help triage those submissions and also to align it into our risk selection so that it's like an augmentation. The human is still making the decision, but it just actually cuts out a lot of the manual work for them.
Fantastic. And Mike, to round it out, what's the main application you're seeing with Gen AI at BNY?
We actually have a really broad array of different applications. To date, we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 different applications that are using generative AI. Much like Jan, we saw a lot of early wins in marketing and sales, saw a lot of wins in terms of really empowering a lot of our more strategic or market analyst folks to do research and synthesis of data across many different fields. And then more recently, we're seeing a lot of success in using Gen AI as a cleanup and enhancement step after typical data extraction. And then also in terms of automating some of our processes around automated repairs of messages that are coming in over the Swift network, and even more recently, software engineering tasks, being able to auto-generate code and close vulnerabilities.
Could you talk about how trust of data and AI is incorporated into your culture, some of the strategic investments, and just overall strategy? Jan, maybe we start with you this time.
Sure. So, I mean, one of the core questions that people often have is what's different with Gen AI and how do I evaluate it? Like traditionally, software is very deterministic, right? So once I test it, it will always behave the same. And one thing we already learned like 10 years ago when we built the Xfinity voice remote, that it was pretty hard to understand for people that you could fix certain errors, but then new errors would appear as you're retraining the model. And now we see with generative AI that kind of complexity of knowing how well it works is really turned up to 11 in certain ways, right? Because the outputs are so much more complex, they're harder to evaluate. And like going beyond vibe checks to truly trust or build that trust in the applications is critical. There's a lot of excitement about the potential, and we see all the happy path, but as practitioners, we know that kind of the devil is in the long tail, right? And so that's kind of where evaluations really are absolutely necessary.
Mike, maybe over to you. How about trust and confidence?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd double down on some of Jan's comments in terms of the vitalness of evaluation. We've done some amount of investment in reusable evaluation frameworks, the infrastructure itself to be able to scale out evaluations across every use case that comes in. Also, we took a little bit of a strategy of building the control tower before any of the planes, and invested early on in building a lot of transparency, a lot of integration of our governance and risk mitigation lifecycle into the platform itself so that we can have that explainability and trust.
Sonia, anything to add there?
The cost of an error, it can be quite significant. To deliver exponentially more features means exponentially more risk if we don't manage it well. So we need to be able to evaluate at scale and at pace, but actually you also need to have tools that help you to evaluate quickly. We ask at the outset, are we doing the right thing? Is it providing a real benefit? How will we know? But when we're getting into AI on AI and agentic, who's marking your homework? Who's observing? And so getting into some co-design and development with Snorkel on the model evaluation is really important to us because we simply won't be able to do it in the way that we have been doing it over the last few years in an AI-only environment.
Well, let me start with the follow-up for you then, Sonia. What does good look like in this environment then? What are some of the underpinnings you need to have in place?
We have two top risks for AI. One is not doing it, and the other is not doing it well. Good looks like we meet our business objectives in a safe and sustainable way. And we know that when we implement these new tools and applications, they're not one and done. So you have to be able to keep on the pulse of it. So how do we think about that evidence of and defensibility so that we can say, yes, we know we've done the right thing. You know, we can look at ethical considerations from the outset, but then a lot of the conversation has been on explain the model. Well, it's very, very difficult to explain the model. You can explain the inputs, but actually does that tell you, what does that evidence for you? What we really need to be thinking about is evidencing the outputs and saying, well, is the model doing what it's intended to do? How can we show that we're doing the right thing by our customers? How do we know that we're winning? How do we know that it's actually doing as intended and delivering as intended? So how do we find the errors? How do we find the good stuff? That's what we're really grappling with now.
Well, how about Jan at Comcast? What does good look like for you guys?
I think there's the big gap that exists between, like, especially with LLMs, where like we all have the vibe that it looks good, even though like for the things that we don't see, it might not be as good. Like one thing that we're focusing a lot on is really extend the bias and fairness testing that we traditionally have applied to our more traditional machine learning models, and now extend it to the LLM outputs. How do they express things? How do they talk? How do they express certain concepts? How can we still capture those like more formal and important concepts in a scalable way, right? And so part of it is extensive human evaluations, putting the human in the loop right before, especially it goes out to customers in general. And then seeing if from that observation, can we add additional like LLM as a judge or other criteria to kind of create early warning signs.
Fantastic. And for banks, in banking, Mike, anything specific in terms of what good might look like for a bank?
We very actively look at what the business impact is going to be, you know, revenue, new revenue streams that we're opening up, cost efficiencies, just like everybody else. One thing that I think is probably a little discounted in a lot of those considerations about, you know, the relative return is specifically risk reduction. So we have a lot of use cases that are specifically looking at, you know, a sanction screening or something. So we are reducing the overall risk footprint. But then in a lot of cases, the arguments against automating a process tend to discount the risk that's already there from an operational point of view from human error. And so we're beginning to really take that into account so that we can say, yes, we are, you know, potentially automating a process, introducing some additional risk, but let's take a really open-eyed look at the risk that we are replacing essentially and potentially reducing.
Yeah, especially in regulated industries, of course, the regulators are always looking for explainability, the magic word. And I liked what you said, Sonia, in terms of like, how do we measure the outputs, right? And because we might not be able to truly understand what's inside the opaque box. Each of you have mentioned AI eval, which maybe just a little more. Where do you see AI eval going? Mike, let's start with you.
I think you're seeing a lot of, I mentioned earlier, investment in the infrastructure and in the repeatable process around evaluations. But I think even the data itself, whether it's the tooling to collect the data meaningfully and in a high signal to noise fashion from either the solutions that they're running or the experts and the subject matter experts bring in their expertise. But we also look at using an iterative approach. So there are so many models out there, just even selecting that which foundation model do we use as the basis as a solution. We do use a lot of the open benchmarks. So Stanford Helm is one of our go-tos to even decide whether or not a model is worth bringing in to the sandbox area, like Jan mentioned, to evaluate. And then what we've seen, though, is that that is always the floor, not the ceiling. We really have to supplement that not only with data that is really tuned to the solution, but also that's relevant to BNY. So one of the provisions we get during model rollout is a beta period, where one of our primary risk mitigants is in just reducing the scope of people who can use it. And so even though we are running against production data, live data, potentially live use case, we have human in the loop, and that allows us to gather the real world feedback on the models, which then provides, that seed of data to feed forward into evaluation. And in addition to actively working with a lot of internal and external parties for red teaming, we're also beginning to see forward motion in using AI for red teaming. And so kind of in engaging that challenger model approach and having AI models actively go out and try to, find penetrations into the system.
Sonia, what's next in AI eval for you guys?
It's really getting beyond kind of your basics and into more contextual. So if we're looking at things like speed and completeness and accuracy, those are kind of like they're no-brainers, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when we're starting to look at unstructured, we really want to look at in the moment, in the context, what should we be acting on? And sometimes these instruments are a bit blunt. So for example, somebody might be having a chat on an IVR around and complaining about a sports match. Well, that's not a complaint, but it is. So moving beyond transactional classification into more contextual is a big deal. A lot more test and learn, loads more test and learn, and really having sandpits and experimental spaces is key for that as well.
Mike, you mentioned open source benchmarks. Let me go to Jan. What's the future on these open source benchmarks?
Like we're looking at kind of at the open source benchmarks for general guidance of like how to do your high level model selection, and then complement that with internal benchmarks, right? And especially for more complex use cases, your internal use cases are still very different. And especially if you want to combine them with like additional information like that you have, like let's say customer data that you want to bring in and that helps you understand like what the specific situation of a customer is if you want to help them. That's not something that you would find in public benchmarks. I mean, the other thing too, where we built on top of it is really focusing on user simulation, right? So again, which something is you don't find in open source. So like that has been a big research topic on our side of how we can use basically actual data that we have observations and simulate that to get a good understanding of the behavior of the system and a more complete understanding than we would get from open source benchmarks alone.
It is really about how do we take it to a much deeper level. Is the model actually performing as well or better than the human could?
Let me come back to you, Mike, in terms of just timeframes. What's your sense in terms of 12, 24 months? How much of the organization will be really leveraging that in the near term?
We already are heavy users of Gen AI solutions. We, as I mentioned, I think earlier, over 95% of our employees are actively using some of these tools, at least in a knowledge assistant kind of fashion. We are also already have started to deploy AI-based digital employees. So it's just a method of deploying some of these agent-based solutions to integrate with the systems that we have. And already, even in just less than a quarter of really having that construct and beginning to tie them into our systems as employees, we've seen huge growth. So I believe even by the end of the year, we're going to see very deep penetration across BNY. Industry-wide, I think probably a little slower.
And Jan, how about you?
I mean, 24 was the year of excitement about AI, right? 25 is kind of like the year of adoption and building the skills. And I would think like 26 is how the majority of our workforce will truly take advantage. I mean, we are currently doing a number of larger efforts around rethinking the software development lifecycle using AI.
And Sonia, how about you? Timeframes in terms of how much impact agentic's going to have?
It's massive. I think that what's shifting is what will quickly become commodity versus what's your point of difference. And, we're seeing that a lot of the buy versus build at the moment, it's too generic. The winners are going to pop out and there's going to be an enormous amount of choice, which is really, really difficult to then distill quickly and keep on top of. And I think the realization that it's not just a standalone, that these things need to be integrated end to end, and there's a lot of business process change and people change that goes with it. So I think the reality check is kind of right here, right now. And I think the other thing that's coming our way is regulator interest. Absolutely.
Let me just go around of one more question is, what's just one thing that you think is really important to get right? Jan, let's start with you.
I mean, I think we already talked about kind of the need for evaluations. If you want to build production systems, you need to kind of really start with the evaluation, similar how we always said in software development, you should start with the unit tests and then develop against them. So I think that the equivalent is really starting with evaluations.
Sonia, what's one thing important to get right in your view?
Asking the right question and knowing that you've actually got an answer that works. We waste an awful lot of time asking not so good questions. And in any business, you need to know what is the problem you're trying to solve? What question are you actually asking that will help you understand that better? And then how do you know? And we can spend an awful lot of time going around in circles if we don't get that clear at the beginning. So I think that's a big one for me.
Fantastic. And Mike, anything to add to those?
It's hard to go last when it's just one thing. If I had to point at a single thing, getting evaluation right at scale is the biggest scale limiter. But I would have also added just making sure to get this, as Jan said, safely in the hands of people to experiment. Because to Sonia's point, you have to make sure you're asking good questions. But a lot of times we're solving problems in complex, sticky areas. And so knowing what questions to ask sometimes takes a little bit of experimentation and exposure to what the tools can do.
Thank you. Well, thanks, Mike Ross from Bank of New York, Sonia Crosby from QBE, and Jan Newman from Comcast. It's John Ratson from Accenture. Thanks so much for the time, and back to you.
Well, that was an awesome panel. Thank you so much, John, from Accenture for moderating, and thanks to all of our panelists for the great discussion and glimpse into how real enterprises with pretty massive scale are really deploying the latest and greatest in agentic AI. So now we're about over with our scheduled time. I was going to say a couple words on kind of the road ahead, and I'll touch on those very briefly. Understand if folks have to hop off as the scheduled time has been hit, but I'll say a couple words, just recap and kind of give a look forward very briefly, and then we'll save about 5 or so minutes for Q&A with all the panelists. So if you are interested in getting some live Q&A in, please stick around for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll invite everyone back on and go a few minutes over for those who can stay. For those who can't stay, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And hopefully you got something out of this, whether it's about some of the stuff that we're working on or just the broader concepts and activities that we were trying to highlight here and provide a forum for. Let me go ahead and share my screen very quickly. So just a few words on the road ahead, and this is mostly a summary of what we've heard so far, and I'll be even briefer than originally intended. So we talked a little bit about our data as a service offering and some of the importance and some of the research concepts, some of the challenges of building great data sets. I mean, you heard this from the research panel. You heard this from the industry practitioner panel about creating the data sets, both for tuning, but of course also for evaluation, where the benchmark data sets, including ones that we've been a part of on the academic side and an open source side, are a first filter, but limited in terms of really getting to the final determination of what model is right for the job and whether it's good enough for deployment. We're really excited in terms of what's ahead on pushing the boundary of complex task types that increasingly mirror real-world agentic settings. Things that blend elements like reasoning and tool use and expert knowledge, that use more complicated and realistic evaluation protocols, that blend and mix modalities, and that diversify the output format of the data itself. Highlighting a couple thoughts here, most of these, as we look ahead, are broadly under the umbrella of data for evaluating and tuning agentic systems. And a lot of this stuff, I'm sure you've all heard of before, and maybe heard of, like, I think this would be true for myself, for years and years. Some of these are not new trends in terms of kind of what's ahead and what are we pushing towards. Things like multimodality has been a goal for years, and we've made great leaps and strides, but I think continued exploration of very richly multimodal data sets and tasks is going to be a really exciting direction, using many tools and action spaces, multi-turn, where there are more interactions back and forth, turns between the user and the agentic system or LLM over longer time spans with more elements of memory and greater, richer, longer term context. Multi-step over, again, much longer sequence lengths. Again, if you think about that multi-turn, multi-step, taken to the extreme of how long it can go, that really describes the difference between kind of a toy interaction and a real human interaction or task. Think about one example of this in the coding domain being going from kind of challenge questions, which are one prompt, one answer maybe, to software engineering, which consists of multiple parties going back and forth with multiple media across code and text documentation and PRs, et cetera, over very long spans of time with very rich context. And I think this is going to be some of the direction that we have to go with AI data for eval and tuning if we want to get systems working in the way that we're all hoping they will. Also, multi-format feedback, being more creative beyond just simple preference ranking or examples of how do we get human feedback both at development time and also while the systems are running to power those flywheels. So if you think about all these forward-looking directions, you look at what we have, as proud of as we are of both the data and the model's performance on those data sets. Our view is that we're still really in the regime of toy tasks and toy data sets compared to the real tasks out there, and that there's a ton more to do here. To see a glimpse of kind of what we're working on as we chug ahead, please keep checking out the leaderboard. We're going to be releasing every week or two, and then releasing open source artifacts along with each of these. And on the development platform side, I'll keep this very brief since we're over time. But in the spirit of looking ahead, and as we previewed in both the research chat and Vignesh's session, kind of what he shared at the end, we think that evaluate and development toolkits are going to be increasingly fused. And we think that evaluate is really going to be the driver for a lot of development as reinforcement learning based techniques and other approaches that are more automated across optimizing both LLMs and multi-component agentic systems take off. You saw some research preview results from Vignesh's demo, where if you can get evaluation, or you saw some high-level previews of those, we're going to be releasing much more in terms of research reports and open artifacts there. But basically, the gist of it is that we believe that if you can really get a specialized, accurate evaluation right, and if you bought anything that we've said so far, or you believe our point of view that it's not trivial to do that, and it takes a lot of data development, curation, and specialized labeling and evaluation to do that. But if you do that, you unlock an increasingly push button, RL-driven way of then tuning the system to work well in that benchmark or that general setting. So this is kind of what we think the very near and longer term future of AI, of specialized AI, is going to be. Evaluations as the new kind of PRD or spec, and increasingly automated ways to fit to that spec, all driven by data and data development and labeling. And of course, as we've talked about, all of these blend together. The toolkit that you're using for evaluation and for development, they fuse and they all run on data, some of which comes from your in-house data sets and experts, and some of which you pull in from external services like our DAS offering to accelerate and keep pace. And that's the future we're building for. So we're excited to traverse it with all of you. With that, I'll once again remind everyone here that we're always excited to talk. If you couldn't tell from us yapping for an hour and a half, please reach out. And now we'll segue to maybe five or so minutes of Q&A. So we'd love to invite all the other panelists back to the stage, those that didn't have a hard stop. And we'll go from there.
Excellent. This has been a really, really exciting session. The chat is full of people who've said that they've gained quite a lot in the last hour and a half. There are a few questions in the Q&A which I thought were really interesting that we should talk about. Vincent, if I can come to you first, there was a question around for organizations in highly regulated industries, how do we provide assurance around data privacy and security within DAS? And there was a related question around how do we also ensure domain expertise and quality of the expert contributors in the network?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll give a high level answer here first. I mean, we are no strangers to working in highly regulated, settings where there's a very high need for data privacy and security. We work with the U.S. government, we work with financial, insurance, healthcare industries, and so as a starting point, we are very comfortable with kind of high security settings when it comes to kind of building and developing these data sets. We tend to take our customers' leads when it comes to how they want to, where they want to store and tenant the data. So the high level idea here is, we will flex to meet whatever the kind of customer or partner's needs are here. And, we have a number of different protocols based on our experience working in these industries to, be as flexible as possible.
Great.
Oh yes, the second
was
part of
on-
the question, how do we keep quality for our experts? Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of that is in the platform approach. So a lot of what you heard from the research team today ends up folding into our workflow and technology layer. In the background, we're giving both task level feedback to our experts. So we're implementing custom quality control models. We're implementing peer review systems to ensure consensus in a lot of these frontier domains. And we're measuring longitudinally the quality of expert contributions over time such that we can make sure that we're triaging the right data points to the right experts and make sure that we're kind of continuing to provide the guidance and training and feedback as needed on a continual basis. So long way to say the platform ends up being a way that we do a lot of that heavy lifting in the background to ensure, that we're uniquely positioned to both ensure overall quality, but also task-specific quality based on a specific customer's spec or needs.
Understood. Thank you, Vincent. I mean, Chris, can I come to you? You've had first-hand experience working with some of the experts that Vincent and the team have sourced, specifically on the insurance dataset curation. Tell us about your experience and what really happened behind this.
Yeah, curation's almost an understatement. They were really pretty heavily involved in the entire process and on different levels. So, I'm a researcher. I've worked in insurance in the past in AI, but ultimately we wanted experts from the insurance industry to develop this data set because it's for them. It's for benchmarking models that will ultimately serve their purposes. And so what I did is I built these kind of development loops with our expert network, looking at individual samples of data, being involved in developing the tasks. Does this task make sense? What's a more realistic task? Does this company profile make sense? Or would we never see this, kind of company apply for insurance? So feedback and input such as that on the level of individual samples. And then worked very closely with them on even developing the architecture. Does this look like something you would see in the field? Are these insurance rules that make sense? And so they actually partnered with us on that level as well, making sure that we were kind of simulating a pretty good proxy for what underwriters would actually be confronted with in the field. So it was a bit more than curation. It's a pretty intensive process operating over multiple kind of development cycles.
Sounds really interesting. Thank you, Chris. I'm really excited about all the other stuff that you and the team are going to open source soon. Talking about open sourcing things, Alex, you really exciting product launch, lots of stuff that we've open sourced recently, fundraising, lots of traction with enterprise customers, and in social media as well. What's next for Snorkel AI?
Well, I could go on and on about this for a long time, but since I was just talking about this at a high level, I'll keep it short. But to the things that you highlighted, I mean, one thing that I didn't mention in the talk track just a few minutes earlier is that we're very excited to be kind of upping our open source and kind of community benchmark contribution. And so, for us, a lot of the stuff we've worked on, over the last couple of years has been, very heavily focused on the enterprise platform. Now that we've publicly launched the data as a service offering, this gives us, one mechanism where we are, it's a little bit more obvious how we can contribute and in the form of kind of putting out benchmarks and data sets. some of these benchmarks will be small and we'll release the full data set. Some of them will be, quite extensive and potentially developed with customers. And so we'll try to release, subsets of the data, and associated, evaluator and reward models, et cetera. But we're very excited to kind of keep a pretty strong cadence going, both directly with some of the ones that we just put up on the leaderboard, along with collaborators who've been doing some work with, for example, Percy Liang's Project Marin over at Stanford, and have some cool results that we're about to share there. And we're spinning up some other kind of academic and community collabs. So very, very excited about kind of data sets and leaderboards and associated model artifacts coming out the door and being shared with the community on a regular, every week or two basis. That's one thing that we're very excited about. And then, of course, some of the themes that we talked about there of, really pushing the boundary of increasingly realistic data sets for evaluation and tuning, multimodal, longer time horizons of action sequences and user interactions, richer context, et cetera. And on the platform side, seeing this, direction going towards, highly specialized evaluation merging with training and tuning through RL. So that's just a sprinkling of things. But of course, on top of all that, very excited to be working hand in hand with our enterprise customers and other partners, since I think everyone in this space, no matter how confident you feel about your line of sight, and I think many of us do feel pretty confident we do about kind of where we see things going, we're all still in learning mode, as many of the panelists echoed. And so we're really excited to, do that, along with and embedded within the process of delivering real value with our customers.
Really exciting, really exciting. You speak of being in the learning mode. The panel here are some of the smartest, brightest people in the space, and everybody's keen to find out how you are keeping on track of AI and everything that's going on. So I'm going to go around every one of you. Let's start with you, Tom, because you're in the bottom left of my screen. How do you keep on top of things?
Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff coming out. I think Hugging Face Papers is a really nice concentrated resource that surfaces the really relevant stuff that's coming out every day.
Okay, great. Thank you. Fred, how are you doing it?
Just try to keep up with everything that's going on lots of different feeds, but also try to relate all of these things to kind of a base set of problems that I'm interested in. I kind of keep track of some of the challenges that I have, and then I think of like, hey, are any of these new things coming up going to be helpful here? And often they are.
Oh, sounds cool. That sounds cool. So work on a problem and then try and solve it with whatever is coming out. Really cool. Amanda, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I like some of the Reddit subreddits that are really technical, and then also GitHub repos, the trending, some of the new starred trending repos are very interesting to look at.
Okay, making a note of that one. Armin, what about you?
Yeah, I was gonna go with the Hugging Face papers, but Tom already mentioned that. I think my LinkedIn feed has been pretty good at like spotting the latest developments.
Okay, all right. Vincent, you?
I think we're in a really privileged place to be able to work with customers and researchers at the frontier. And so honestly, just partnering really closely and being that, both vendor in many cases, but also research partner is a really exciting way to, kind of be at the frontier and help shape it.
Okay, so you just give your mates a call. All right, Chris.
Unlike
Yeah, so Hugging Face Papers, as others have said, is great. And also, actually similar to what Vincent said, paying attention to the field and learning from customers and learning about business problems. I try to stay as rooted as possible in like what's useful and what's going to solve tasks. And so like what are the things on the horizon that businesses are going to need? And people more generally, I try and stay grounded in that and then pay attention to research that's especially relevant to those needs.
Okay, very interesting. Alex, finally coming to you. How are you keeping on track of things with everything that's going on in your life?
Yeah, well, yeah, 3 kids under 5 and all the busyness of Snorkel leaves me often in periods where I'm functionally illiterate. So I will not try to overrepresent my volume of active reading, at least in periods. I think there are various places to kind of keep up on papers. I think that always feels like you're getting buried at this point in the space. I think that's an honest admission that most people would agree with. I think, social networks are very helpful for this, right? Surrounding yourself with smart people and just kind of repeating what they say, or if you have time, actually double clicking and reading what they recommend to read, jokes aside. That goes for, social media, whether it's X or LinkedIn or wherever as well, can be quite helpful. I think two other things. Number one, kind of like what Fred said. I'm going to try to one up Fred with a needlessly more complicated answer, but I've heard great advice of that, keeping a couple of kind of prototype problems in your head, and then also frameworks. And so I guess there's one, this will be my last comment, but it is also helpful to realize, and I say this as, I've spent most of my life as an academic in some form or fashion also. And I've, written a bunch of papers that are, now I look at them, they look needlessly complex. Like there's a natural pull towards complexity. Everyone partakes in that. When you're writing something, you want to emphasize all the neat, unique, exciting facets of it, all of the, hard-won intellectual, epiphanies and accomplishments. You also just want to make it sound exciting. You want to make it sound novel and different, and you want to push on all those areas of novelty and complexity. But the net result of that is that, like, most ideas are simple variations, but they get represented in ways that are really complex, and then the reader has to kind of pare them back down to the simple gist. So keeping that in mind, that like most things are probably similar to something you've thought of before or experienced, and trying to project down to that simple idea and not being kind of intimidated by the complexity and feeling like you have to chase every rabbit hole. I think that's one thing that helps kind of with quick absorption of knowledge. And then it's that what Fred said, and I'd add frameworks of like you keep I've heard this from some of the smartest AI theory people I know of. Keep 3 toy problems in your head and a couple of useful frameworks. You come across a new paper or idea that looks incredibly complex, try to project it to how you'd use it on one of those toy problems. Try to project it to one of your simple frameworks versus, trying to understand every nook and cranny. That's great when you get the time to do that, but when you don't have the time, that's the way that I like to think of it.
Okay, that is a brilliant insight. Thank you very much, everybody in this panel, for the fantastic insights that you've provided everybody in the audience today. Thank you, everybody in the audience, for joining us. I hope you found it useful. Till next time, thank you very much. See ya.
Thank you all.